huge deal about recognizing these two regions that have been up for debate on who's actually in control of it for many years, right? In that whole Donbass region on eastern or in the eastern Ukraine, the same place where MH17, the flight that was shot down by the Buk missile, same area where that missile was actually fired from by Russian-backed separatists, right? And Putin absolutely played war games like a motherfucking pro over the last week. You have watched him organize his army. I mean, think about this for a second. Put yourself in the spot of somebody just sitting back on the sidelines looking at the moves that Putin has made. He wanted those regions to be, he wants those regions. He believes that the Ukraine belongs with the Russian Federation. Basically, he believes that he believes a lot of things. He gave a whole historical background earlier today of his thoughts and his beliefs, what he feels Russia created, et cetera, et cetera. Russia's absolutely flexing their motherfucking muscles right now. So, and listen, I'm only talking from, I love country. I love country all day. But God damn, Vladimir Putin just chess moved. He just put the motherfucking checkmate. So he essentially, Russia has been sort of against this area in eastern Ukraine. Russia's been against recognizing it as Ukraine territory. They don't even really recognize Ukraine as a sovereign country, as a sovereign nation. Russia, Vladimir Putin, they do not believe that Ukraine should even exist on the map, okay? So what does he do? Well, over the last week or so, he starts flexing his might, although he's been sort of talking about this for years. If you've really ever paid attention to Putin, he has been on this topic for years, okay? So there's absolutely no question in my mind that this was a very well thought out war game type strategy that he basically pushed. Look at how he annexed Crimea, meaning when I say annexed Crimea, what I'm saying is that he literally went in and took a country and made it Russia. So imagine you living in Texas, right? And Mexico comes in and with violent might takes Texas for their own and says you are now considered Mexicans. That's exactly what happened here. Except in this case, he has recognized these two individual areas as independent states, so to speak. And there's absolutely nothing stopping this man from turning around and saying, oh, well, I know I may have recognized you as independent places or independent states, so to speak, but now you're going to be mine, right? We will take it. He has now used this, which we were just talking about this earlier today. He has now used this move, positioning troops around Ukraine on the north, the west, and the southern flanks. Okay, the northeast and the southern flanks, right? And he surrounded Ukraine, and now he's just pushing in. He's encroaching in. So now he has eastern Ukraine, where it allows him to get closer by recognizing these places, these Russian-backed. This particular area that he recognized was only about like 65-70% controlled by Ukraine. There was an amazing move to sort of flip that a few years ago, and there's been like a separate led government, so to speak, in these two individual regions. So now that he has basically recognized them as independent places, he basically says, hey, I'm going to recognize you, but what are you going to give me? You're going to have to give me what I want. And what I want is I want to push on in further. I want to be able to bring my troops onto this ground. I mean, he didn't wait even 24 hours. He didn't even wait 24 hours. As soon as he signed those agreements, I would not be surprised if they were already moving in. And now we know why we have been seeing all that military movement close to this border in eastern Ukraine. He absolutely bluffed people with this. And this don't underestimate or don't mistake the fact that this is absolutely Russia's way of encroaching in on that territory of Ukraine. All I'm saying is, why do Americans want to keep involving themselves in other people's bullshit? I don't want to see not a single American soldier sent to the fucking Baltics to fight this bullshit, okay? America didn't give, all this type of energy when he went in there and annexed Crimea and took it back. So all I'm saying is Ukraine is a big place. They've got more than enough people and they don't need our military might. I don't like how much Biden is sort of promising and sort of putting us into this situation. I know it's too late, but there's always a chance, right, Dolly? So now that he was able or managed to position himself with even more closer access to Kiev, right? He is now moving troops into these two areas on the eastern Ukraine that he essentially signed as independent states earlier today. And he is now calling it, of course, a peacekeeping mission. Just hours after he signed decrees recognizing the independence of these Moscow-backed regions. It is unclear if Russian troop movements mark the beginning of an invasion of Ukraine that Western leaders have warned about for weeks, but multiple U.S. and Western officials have warned Monday's move could serve as the opening of a larger military operation targeting the country. Oh, yes, definitely. This is, oh my God, the war games this man is playing. He's trying to think 10 steps ahead, right? Strategies, all strategies, and bluffing is part of that. And he still ended up getting what he wanted. And not only did he get to get those Moscow-backed regions, basically up under Russian control, essentially, it moves him several hundred miles closer to the capital of Ukraine. It moves them closer to the more populated areas just in case they need to swoop in. And this is absolutely invading Ukraine. Absolutely. Amazing move. I'm pretty sure he had already planned that move before he even signed those papers today. This was a source of contention for several years, this whole Ukraine sovereign nation, DPR, LPR, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. This has been conversation for years. And it's like I give you this, you give me that. And if you really look at a map, okay, just an overall map where Russia sits, where the Ukraine sits, Russia's now impeding themselves into this, this eastern area. And it's a pretty nice piece of land, pretty nice big swath of land, actually. And what's crazy, y'all, is the Ukrainians and Russia. I know it's kind of crazy to say the Ukrainians and Russia, but there's people that, they all speak the same language. It's the same people, essentially. And then, of course, once they got those independent statehood or whatever recognition that they wanted, now they'll say things like, well, we're on our land. This is one of our allies. The men that that actually took this signature and sat there with Putin while he made this decision, I wouldn't be surprised if they're found dead within the next 5 years somewhere. He is definitely going to snake them. I am safe. I know one of them for sure was the so-called president of the DPR. I've seen him before, like when when MH17 was shot down. I remember seeing him make a lot of speeches, and this is when it was just DPR. Yes, they were cool with Moscow. They were cool with Russia. Of course, it's Russian-backed militia groups that have been in Eastern Ukraine for the longest. What you gotta love probably more than anything is when those Russian soldiers accidentally out themselves when they're tweeting pictures of the forest that they're held up in. But it's crazy because now he's making this like it's a peacekeeping mission. You're trying to send peacekeepers, so-called peacekeepers, into an area that doesn't really need you to you usually only see that in war zones, really, really bad war zones, right? Ukraine is not exactly that, although there has definitely been some fighting there and war, whatever you want to call it, but not like that, not where there's no current active situation that would require peacekeepers. Putin knows exactly what he's doing. He'll look you in the face and say one thing, and he'll turn around and be talking to his staff, doing a whole nother. He's an absolute full-on politician. He knows good and damn well no murder would ever be traced back to him. He doesn't even have to order it at this point. And I believe he's become so emboldened with look at all the people we've seen poisoned, even journalists, other political figures, that anyone who's even spoke a thought that criticized Putin, ex-KGB have came up dead. Several, actually, all over the world. Now, his highly choreographed televised meeting, and he accused Ukraine of carrying out acts of aggression. Do you think this is a situation where it looks like a president that wants war? Ukraine's doing everything they can to show that they're not antagonizing this, they're not aggravating this situation. This is most definitely Putin flexing his weight. He's got a huge army. He's got a huge fucking army, man, at his disposal. If you look at a map of the USSR, now, for those of you that weren't born back in the 70s, you may not even know what the hell the USSR is. But when I was a kid, okay, the USSR was what we referred to as Russia. And they are now the Russian Federation, but they weren't always Russia. Okay. They weren't always Russia. If you actually look at a map, compare the Republic then and now. See if I can pull one up. All right. So just kind of like an example here of the USSR. What year was this map made? Hold on. Tell me. So this is a map from 1989. Reagan was in president then, or Reagan was in the presidency then. Where is this? Was, hold on. Looking for a earlier map, actually. But again, if you wanted to compare this to something, compare it to like Mexico coming over the border and violently taking the state of Texas and putting up guards all across the Oklahoma-Texas border and saying, no, Texas belongs to Mexico now. You're going to fall under our laws, our rules. That's exactly what this is like. Almost like Canada coming in and taking the state of New York. You are no longer following the United States laws. You're going to fall under Canadian laws, which actually are a little bit more flexible. I'm just saying. But this is probably a really good map here as far as, you know, what the USSR used to look like. It was disintegrated in 1991. Crimea wasn't even a country on the map during that time. You can even see how huge Russia is, right? Sarah Palin says she can see Russia from her house. So, oh, hey, what's up, everybody in the chat? I haven't even, I don't think I've even spoke to y'all in the chat yet. Just so you guys know, kind of moving forward, I'm going to do like an initial speak. Then I'm going to stop even looking at the chat while I'm doing my thing. And then I'll come back at the end and follow back up. But it's to the point now where the Ukraine and other NATO soldiers are now recording any sort of like ceasefire violations. And they're going to just stack it up, the evidence, so to speak. But there has been increasingly intensifying activity that has been happening on that northeastern border of Ukraine and Russia, and now the DPR and the LPR, okay? Again, the guys that sat here with and did this with him, hold on a second. Putin, DPR, LPR. All right. And this may be helpful to some people because people are like, what the fuck do you mean a DPR and LPR? Again, he basically said, instead of coming in and saying that this part of Ukraine is now Russia, okay, we'll go ahead and recognize an independent state with an independent government for now. Because right now, you know, I don't have to deal with trying to govern them, but yet I still get the benefits of being able to use that space to get closer to my target, which is Kiev. All right, let's see if we can get this to pull up. I'll give it a second. Time for this. All right. I didn't even hear about people even cheering. Like a lot of people, although there's got to be a certain appetite for this kind of thing. I'm not so sure how much that appetite really exists out there. Hold on.
In eastern Ukraine, you have this very industrial region called Donbass, quite Russian-speaking. A lot of Ukraine's heavy industry is located there, and with quite strong links to Russia. So when the crisis broke out in 2014, basically the Ukrainian government authority collapsed there. And after the annexation of Crimea in March 2014, these local activists started springing up and asking for autonomy for these two regions, for Donetsk and Lugansk. you had war breaking out between the Ukrainian government and these territories, which was basically, in military terms, a war between Kiev and elements of the Russian military. You then had two ceasefire agreements, a line of contact running across Ukrainian territory established, which basically cuts these regions in two. On the one side, you have the rebel territories backed by Moscow. On the other side, you have Ukrainian government territory, and this is continuing to this day. They're different in that sense from the other cases in my report, Abkhazia, Transnistria, Northern Cyprus, that these places are much more artificial. If there wasn't Russian support, they would collapse. A lot of the citizens really would like, I think, to go back to being part of Ukraine on some terms or other. So in that sense, I don't think these places are so sustainable. Also, these places are more like rogue states. They use the death penalty. They're very criminalized. They're not welcoming to international organizations. So they have much more of a kind of rogue status than the other cases. There's still fighting going on. People are still dying. There's this line that cuts across Ukrainian territory, and literally hundreds of thousands of people on either side who've been split apart by this conflict. And many of them are, up to 15, 20,000 people a day sometimes are crossing this line, either to visit relatives or for economic reasons, or in a lot of cases, because they still want Ukrainian documents, whether it be birth and death certificates, or in a lot of cases, Ukrainian pensions. So you have this very artificial conflict, but a huge number of people affected by it, several million people affected by it. And on the other side of the line, you have these sort of shadowy territories which call themselves independent states, but no one takes them very seriously. But they do control territory, and they are not going back under the control of Kiev anytime soon. They've been forgotten, that Moscow doesn't really want them, is just using them as pawns, and yet the Ukrainian government really is not offering them very much either. Many of them don't want to go back to being ruled by Kiev, which is why I think the key conclusion from my study of this area of eastern Ukraine is that the Ukrainian government is not using a kind of hearts and minds policy to win back people in these territories. Many of them want to get pensions or birth and death certificates. They're crossing this line, but they have many difficulties in doing so and have many obstructions in getting bureaucratic obstructions about getting these Ukrainian documents. They're basically being told, we don't really want you, we don't really regard you as proper Ukrainian citizens.
I think that really explains the dynamics actually quite well. That's exactly, there is something I want to give y'all, I guess a little homework, okay? Something that you guys can go and check out whenever you get a chance. But I was watching these when they were actually happening, okay? There is a Vice special called Russian Roulette. Let me give you the link, because they actually have a playlist. Hold on. Here, I'm going to give you this link, and y'all work your way through and definitely check those out. There was, gosh, I think I know I watched over 30 Russian roulette videos. This Vice was there when all of this stuff kicked off back in 2014. If you want a really good understanding of this whole like Donbass territory and the politics, okay, and how Moscow's just absolutely using them for a pawn on a freaking chessboard or whatever. He doesn't really want them, which is true. But it is also true that Ukraine really hasn't done much to sort of win those people back. So check out that series when you guys get a chance. Russian Roulette on Vice News. Okay. All right. Now, before I get out of here, I do want to sort of speak on something really quick. Hold on. That. If you guys get a chance, definitely go check out QB's last video. Did y'all get to see it? All I have to say is about damn time. It's about damn time. That's all I'm going to even say. I think, I don't know how. I honestly don't know how QB could have possibly been able to even, how could the relationship how could it stay the same after what all happened, a few weeks ago? And then of course we all sort of watched how it just became a fucking garbage dump. It got so horrible and so just disgusting. There was no way, I don't think, that neither one of them could have ever went back to what it was before. I think he's being pretty stand up about it. Way more I know than I would be, especially if that would have been me and the others. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not even going to repeat the accusations up here. I'm not even going to repeat anything about words that were used or anything, because I knew it was bullshit when it was said. And I don't want to be a part of perpetuating some bullshit ass narrative like that, because that just beyond unfair. And I think what people sort of got wrong, and I actually went back, y'all, and I actually listened again to that Zoom call. And it was just even more disgusting. And it was clear that someone was simply only concerned about themselves. I mean, even when that individual said, how can he be mad? It's my child or whatever. And it's like, too much for some YouTube shit, too much unnecessary stress for some YouTube shit. And the truth is, QB really don't have to do that. He don't. His show is, I don't know what his format is when he comes back. He says he's done with the beef sector. Good for him. Like, I get it, because it's so malicious over there in those parts. I get it. But I think he could actually just take normal topics like everybody else and have a pretty damn fantastic show. There's absolutely no question in my mind that he's much more entertaining. Okay. And he, I never looked at him as being in someone's shadow. I always felt like he was much more entertaining and than that other individual. Period. Many of you know, and I've said it before, I watched him first. Like, everybody knows who he is, right? I'm happy for him. I'm glad he did what he did. I think he's handling it like a fucking G. And I'll just leave it at that. Good for him. Glad to hear it. And it doesn't really matter how long it took. I just wanted to express that. I just wanted to express how I felt about that. And that's it. I'll leave it alone. Anyway, Shout out to everybody in the chat. What's up, Timothy? Lavina, what's up? Liz, hello, hello. Shout out to the Crimes and Investigations folks in the house. I meant to end this video on the Crimes and Investigations channel since I'm done talking about Putin now. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll catch y'all next time.